Hey, Kaden, they're saying they can't see the slides. Can you make it bigger?
Is this big enough?
I've seen every Alien movie, and here's what you need to know before we see Alien Romulus on August 16th. Romulus is technically the ninth Alien movie. The franchise started 45 years ago and includes all of these. The movies over here on the left are tell the story of character Ellen Ripley, and these two over here are technically prequels to those. But I think it's better to describe them as an origin story for the whole Alien universe. Now, as much as I'd love to give you a detailed synopsis of each of these, we'd be here all day, and that's what Wikipedia is for. My goal is to get you prepared for Romulus. So I think what would be helpful is if we took a look at the bigger picture of what Alien is all about. And I think it would be helpful if we focus specifically on Alien and Aliens, gave them a little special attention because Romulus is supposed to take place between Alien and Aliens. They're also considered the classics, the blueprint for every Alien movie that came afterward. So let's go ahead and get started with Alien, which takes place in 2122 and follows the crew of the Nostromo, which is a commercial towing vehicle. On its way back to Earth, the Nostromo receives a unusual transmission from a nearby moon, and under the company contract they all signed, the crew is obligated to investigate. Now, I think one of the reasons that Alien went on to become a classic is in large part thanks to its design. It does such a good job of placing you in a world that feels real and lived in. That's important in any movie, but it was especially important in Alien because even though it was considered sci-fi, it was always meant to feel grounded. At one point, it was described as truckers in space. And I think you really feel that when you see this blend of retro-futuristic technology and grubby mechanics. And that same design style seems to be influencing Romulus, so it'll be cool to see if they have a new take on this truckers in space idea or if they use that design in a new way. But the visual style was key to the original because it made the moment where they discover an abandoned alien ship all the more unsettling. As you can guess, things do not go well on this ship. One of the crew members finds a room full of eggs, and he's brought back to the Nostromo with this thing stuck on his face, which has come to be called a face hugger. Luckily, it just seems to fall off and die. The guy seems fine, so the crew decides to have one last celebratory meal before they go back into hypersleep. Now, unfortunately, I cannot show you what happens, but it has gone on to be one of the most famous scenes in movie history. The man thrashes and convulses until an alien creature bursts out of his chest in violent, horrific fashion. Now, it's crucial to understand that this moment is what got the movie made in the first place, and it's probably what cemented Alien as an all-time classic because it was brutal, shocking, and let the audience know exactly what they were in for. It set the standard for the rest of the franchise, including Romulus. So in a matter of hours, the creature has grown to be a full-size xenomorph, which is the technical term for the alien, and it's picking the crew off one by one. Now, if we pause here for just a moment and talk about the way the creature operates, we can recontextualize where the horror comes from. This thing is a cold-blooded killing machine, but it's not a typical movie monster because it's not eating anybody. Its goal in attacking humans is not to consume them, but to reproduce. The very first victim gets impregnated, of course, unwillingly. He then dies when the creature forces its way out of his body in a violent birth. Now, these themes probably deserve their own separate discussion, but I will say that while the xenomorph design is in and of itself scary, I think the true terror comes from this underlying element. And it's always interesting to see how in new adaptations they play with these themes. Romulus could either re-emphasize those themes or add an additional dynamic with its depiction of the alien. So the alien continues picking off the crew until we're left with Ripley, who's played by Sigourney Weaver as the film's hero and sole survivor, which brings us to Aliens. Now, the famous Hollywood legend is that when writer-director James Cameron came to pitch his take on an Alien sequel, he went up to a whiteboard and wrote Alien, then he added an S, then he drew a line through the S, and the studio was sold. And nearly 40 years later, Aliens has gone on to be just as famous and iconic as the first movie, which is interesting because it's so different in tone and style. James Cameron set out to merge Alien with the kind of action that he'd learned to do while making Terminator. So we still have the horror elements, but everything is ramped up a few notches. Ripley has been in hypersleep for 57 years. In that time, the company has started a human colony on the same moon where her crew originally found the alien ship. So in that, of course, they've lost contact with the colonists, and they're sending Marines to investigate. Ripley agrees to go along on the condition that the company will destroy any aliens they find, not bring them back for research. When the Marines get there, of course, the colonists have all been turned into xenomorphs, meaning the colony's flooded with aliens. There is one survivor, though, a little girl named Newt, to whom Ripley becomes a surrogate mother. Ripley also discovers that the company actually ordered the colonists to go and investigate the alien ship with the intention of creating more xenomorphs that they could harvest as assets. Which brings us to one of the other most prevalent fears in all of Alien, almost as scary as the xenomorph, is the company, identified in most occasions as the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. Rarely, if ever, does the company show up where it's not displaying extreme versions of profit over people. The company often uses its employees as pawns, easily sacrificed to achieve their goal. And I just happened to notice this logo in one of the shots for Romulus. So it'll be interesting to see if the corporation continues to operate in this way in the new movie. Now, we can't move on from aliens before we talk about one final thing. Ripley and Newt come face to face with the creature that has been laying all the alien eggs, the infamous xenomorph queen. Now, this thing pursues them for a little bit until it has Newt cornered, and one of the greatest action movie moments ever happens.
Get away from her, you bitch!
The Queen and Ripley duke it out for a little bit, but she's able to eject it out of an airlock into the cold deep of space. And now safe, her and Newt go into hypersleep. Sadly, after all that, Newt is killed off screen in the opening montage to Alien 3. A stowaway facehugger impregnates Ripley, causes the ship to crash on a prison planet, and Newt dies in the crash. The facehugger then goes off to infect a dog, creating a new kind of xenomorph. Ripley teams up with the prisoners to destroy the xenomorph, which they do. Ripley also sacrifices herself at the end of the movie to ensure that the alien inside of her dies as well, until 200 years later in Alien Resurrection, when military scientists decide to clone Ripley in the hopes that the clone will have an alien embryo inside of her as well. They turn out to be right, and now they're able to create as many aliens as they want, which of course is a terrible idea. The xenomorphs get loose, engage the ship's emergency protocols, which send it back to Earth. Ripley is able to set it on a collision course so that when it crashes, it kills all the aliens. And this brings Ripley's story to a close. So then we jump back to Prometheus. Now, by this point, 6 movies had already come out featuring xenomorphs. Ridley Scott, who had directed the original, was asked to return, but he felt that Alien had lost its impact. So even though Prometheus was marketed as a prequel to Alien, filmmakers really kind of wanted it to be its own thing. It tells the story of a group of scientists who are looking for a race of beings known as engineers, as in they engineered us, humanity. They set out on an expedition to discover the engineers' home planet, but it turns out to be a facility where the engineers have developed a bioweapon meant to destroy humanity. As a result of the bioweapon, all the engineers at this facility are already dead, so the scientists don't get to answer any of their questions. The movie starts by asking a simple question of who created us and why, but that question is a facade because it can't really be answered. So what the movie's really asking is, how do we react to the existential crisis when the answer to our most profound questions ends up disappointing us? Now, ironically enough, the heart of the story is not a human at all, but an android named David, who's on his own journey of self-discovery and finding his humanity or lack thereof. In the rest of the movie, David continues searching the facility and finds a spaceship, which is where we start to link Prometheus back to Alien because the ship looks exactly like the one that Ripley and her crew discovered back in the original movie. David ends up taking one of these ships to go and find the engineer's actual home planet, which he does in Alien Covenant. When he arrives, David launches the bioweapon, destroying all life on the planet, including the engineers. He continues using the bioweapon to experiment to create the perfect organism. This is where we fully link back up to Alien because David eventually succeeds and creates a xenomorph. So now it seems like David is the maniacal villain that sets the whole franchise in motion. But the questions that were asked about humanity's creators in the last movie are now asked about what humanity has created. What happens when a race of beings that don't know why they exist create another race of intelligent beings? In this case, artificial intelligence, which is how we get David, who's simply the result of imperfect creators. So then we're left to wonder, is that what we are? Now, most Alien movies feature an android character, and they honestly end up being some of my favorite aspects of the story. We know there's an android character in Romulus, so it'll be interesting to see if they serve a more functional role or if we get any of that journey of self-discovery. Which brings us back to Romulus. Now, I haven't seen the movie, so it's hard to pinpoint what elements of the franchise they might pull in, but it really could be anything. Do we see the influence or return of David? Do we see the fallout of Ripley's actions aboard the Nostromo, or do the events of Romulus set up something about the colony in Aliens? Who knows? But now that we have an idea of the bigger picture, we can also speculate about the kind of ideas that might be present in Romulus. Do we see the fear of traumatic violence, or of extreme corporate greed, or of deep existential questions? Or does the film try to tackle something completely new? I do have one hint as to where the movie might go. The director, Fede Alvarez, did an interview recently where the reporter asked him, is Romulus a standalone movie? And I paraphrased his answer, but it does give us some insight. He said, that's not correct. The way we crafted it is, if you haven't seen any of them, I'm jealous because you'll have an incredible experience. You don't know how the creature is born and you don't know any of these things. That's fantastic. You'll have a blast. But if you've seen the others, then it's a completely different experience because you'll find those connections with the other movies. It is connected to all of them, from Alien to Alien Covenant. So there you have it. Unfortunately, I can't tell you how scary the movie will be, but you can always do what I do and just watch it through your fingers. However, even though I am watching it through my fingers, I'll be watching it on an IMAX screen, the biggest screen possible. More I could talk about with these movies, but we should probably give IMAX their screen back.